Good evening, everyone. We will get started in just a minute. Just opened it up, so we're going to let everybody file in before we start. All right, folks are still coming in. It has slowed down just a smidge. So I think we will go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us for our 8th Community Climate Forum, Combating Climate Change with Native Plants. My name is Lisa Ligis, and as always, I will be your host and moderator tonight. I am a conservation education liaison at the St. Louis Zoo and co-chair of the Zoo's Climate Change Task Force. Or I'm sorry, Climate Communication Committee. I keep forgetting that we changed our name. Before I introduce our presenters, I want to first give a quick overview of how this webinar will work. First, the webinar is being recorded and will be shared at stlzoo.org/climate change. Probably the same page where many of you registered for tonight's webinar. Because this is a webinar, we are unable to see or hear you, but our goal tonight is to engage with you, to hear your thoughts and answer your questions. We will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat, so please put your questions in the Q&A box and any thoughts or discussion points in the chat. And please remember to be respectful and courteous to our presenter, panelists, and each other. And please keep your questions and thoughts relevant to the presented topic. If someone is unable to follow these protocols, their comment or question may be removed, and they themselves may be removed entirely from the webinar. Our presenters will also leave as much time as possible at the end of their presentation to address questions and discussion points with everyone. So without further ado, let's begin. Our distinguished presenters tonight are Louise Bradshaw, the Director of Education here at the Zoo, and Jean Ponzi, Green Resources Manager at the Earthways Center of the Missouri Botanical Garden. Take it away, Louise and Jean.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. And Jean and I are here to share with you a number of things that are really dear to our heart and make us really, really excited. And especially when we talk about climate solutions, we want to be as positive and up and hope-filled as possible. Jean, I think you're still muted.
There we go. Not anymore. I have to say, Louise, I changed the verb of the title of this from combating climate change to dance with plants. Because we can achieve that end. We can achieve the ends that we want, which is humanoids living in accord, what a concept, with the entire planet and all of our relatives and all of our living communities. Doing things that we still have dance competitions, but we don't have to whack each other. So
This is really about our love affair with the planet, our love affair with nature. This is really about taking an asset-based approach, and really creating a stronger, more reciprocal, and even regenerative relationship with nature.
And we had that opportunity. No, I'm sorry. We're gonna have to hold our hands up, aren't we, Louise? At least I am.
We're doing this tag team style, folks. So thank you for bearing with us. Growing native plants isn't an exploration. It's an experiment. I know it's something that I've been engaged in for a long time, and I'm still learning things about some tried and true native plants and about my own personal landscape. And this really obviously can blossom into a lifelong, shall we say, love affair with nature. And haha, Jean, bug you? Haha, that was pretty funny in a good way.
Yeah. Ecology is all about relationships. Ecology is about relationships in place. And we're talking tonight about what we can do in the place where each one of us lives. if it's a house, if it's got a patio, if it's near a park, if it's an apartment, if it's, whatever, wherever we are, we can engage with plants, learn about them, learn about relationships and ecological relationships, and help turn the Titanic of climate change. And in all the time that I've been talking about plant-related stuff, which has been quite a while, and also recycling and changing your light bulbs and all that more sort of human-centric climate solutions kind of stuff, it only really recently occurred to me how powerful a strategy ecological landscaping with native plants is. And so we're going to start by taking a whack at the conventions of landscaping, the ways in which we are so, what can I say? We're so enthralled, as in thralls, as in we've got collars around our necks and we're hooked to our lawnmowers. We use a lot of machinery, we use a lot of fuel, we use a lot of water. I happen to live in the city of St. Louis, where water is not metered on the basis of use, but most of the people in the St. Louis region pay for water on the basis of use. Your landscape choices, especially the trees, which are multitaskers, can help cut your home heating and cooling costs. Plantings around you can help reduce noise and certainly reduce air pollution. So landscaping is really a powerful strategy in a lot of ways. And now I'm going to really take the big whack at turf, grass, the green carpet, which is only a few cellular steps away from concrete that you have to do maintenance on, green concrete. Again, recent research here. I was working on a grant proposal and I was trying to get some documentation about carbon reduction and carbon emission reduction relative to landscaping. The 67% of non-road emissions comes from the gas-powered lawn maintenance equipment. Mostly it's lawns. It's also some bushes and trees and stuff. And 4% of all non-road emissions, CO2 emissions, is generated by landscaping. That's a lot. Now, maybe you have a big enough place that it doesn't make sense to switch from your gas guzzling, not environmentally friendly or you friendly in any way more, to a real mower, the quiet push kind. That is the case with me in the place that I live in St. Louis, because our place is just too big. And when you push the wheel mower, it only cuts when you push it forward. So then what's the opportunity? The opportunity is to take some of that property out of turf and transform it into native plantings. And that can be a challenge because we have an attitude about our environments that we have inherited from the Crawleys of Downton Abbey and the other great, landed gentry of the old world. And we also have this idea that we're supposed to keep up with our neighbors and that a tidy green lawn that means a good neighbor. Changing that value set, changing that aesthetic, one conversation and 1 yard at a time, and then really having it move out into the communities that we are in. Imagine if we were overlooking a street plan like this, a streetscape like this, and saw twice as much green and half as much anything else, half as much non-living stuff. Now that would necessitate changing some of the roads, but it also would necessitate changing some of the ways in which these properties were managed. So what's the alternative? What's a way through this tunnel? Louise?
Well, interesting you would ask. How about gardening for pollinators, using native plants? Look how beautiful they are. And look at the wide variety of animals that really rely on them. We're in the migratory pathway for monarch butterflies. Some of you probably know that this is a species that's been, kind of on the brink of being declared endangered. And what an opportunity to be able to plant critical native landscape. I mean, you too can be an incredibly important conservationist, even if you have a teeny tiny yard or you have a pot, you can do it too. So pollinator gardening is really fantastic.
And speaking of combating and competition, Louise, remember in 2014, it was the 250th anniversary of the city of St. Louis, and the Milkweeds for Monarchs project was going to put 250 monarch gardens around. And then Project Pollinator popped up in St. Louis County, not to be outdone. So that love of competition, that love of one-upmanship, that can function ecologically too.
And, native plants really make vital connections. As I said, we were talking about the monarch butterflies in your upper right-hand corner, but, zebra swallowtails, the monarch caterpillars, I know so many people who, through early exposure or, exposure as adults, they're like, wait, I had no idea. Look at what is this? Taking a picture of something in their yard or something that they ran across, just along their way during their day. So native plants really help support native animals. They also decrease carbon emissions. How about that? And you know what I love from the education space? They're really important for us. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the research behind connecting children to nature in a little bit, but we also know that that's really important for children of all ages. Really, really key and really, really important. So Jean, what are some of the initiatives that are happening that would help us with this?
Well, this is a big one. This is a big new umbrella that I am one of several partners working to bring in kind of and get established in St. Louis. Homegrown National Park is an idea that was developed by Doug Tallamy. You see him there with his kind of thoughtful pose and his hat on. He's an entomologist. He's a bug guy at the University of Delaware, and he is the author of 3 best-selling books. Bringing Nature Home, I believe that was published in 2011. Nature's Best Hope came out in the beginning of 2020. And then last year, The Nature of Oaks. Doug Tallamy is the best explainer, in my opinion, of why ecological landscaping is important web of life that we have been ripping up, frankly, with our human habits. And Homegrown National Park is a concept that he came up with, thinking about the acreage of our entire national park system and how much acreage is in turf in the United States, in the 50 United States. And the idea here is if each one of us, or many of us, a critical mass of us, took 50% of our property out of turf, which doesn't support any life. It doesn't even support soil organisms. Nobody eats turf. And then had 70% of the plant tissue by volume on our property be native species. You can get to that pretty easily with trees. That acreage would exceed the entire total acreage of the entire national park system, including Denali. And we can't just rely on those far-flung extraordinary places anymore for habitat, because we're eating the habitat. So here is Doug Tallamy again, giving us a little bit of a graphic depiction of how we conventionally have chosen plants for our landscape. Because they're pretty, or maybe because they're new. They're the new thing that you can get at the garden center, because they give us privacy around our property, because a plant might be the anchor, the one tree or the one bush or the focal point that you have in your property. And when you only make your landscaping decisions based on these kinds of values, you get this. It might be pretty, but there is no life there. This habitat, even the stuff that is blooming, is not supporting food webs. It's not sequestering carbon. It's not cleaning water. It's not performing any of the functions that an ecological landscape can do and should do. So here's how to balance that out. When we change the way in which we're landscaping and we emphasize a landscape that supports food webs, and the basis of that is plants and caterpillars, especially. When we garden, when we retool our landscape so that they can sequester carbon, so that the landscape itself can protect water and store water, create pollinator habitat, give us the opportunity to appreciate wildlife, and even moderate heat islands and the heat stresses that increasingly more and more of us are subject to. So then this kind of landscape that still has some turf around it. It still has places to walk out and run and throw a frisbee with the dog and have the kids play, whatever it is. But it's alive, it's biodiverse, it's thriving. It is humans living in the midst of how nature forms ecological landscapes so that everything supports everything else. And landscaping professionals increasingly know how to do that. And that's the cutting edge. That's the leading edge of landscaping as a profession. So this is a pretty innovative concept. But Louise, we've got some other innovations that we've been dogging down to talk about here.
So sure, let's talk about a really great connection between looking at alternative sources of energy and how do we create habitat for pollinators at the same time using native plants. Check this out. And this is Missouri. Missouri really working on a planning tool for solar sites to be able to figure out how on these kind of like larger array solar sites, but you could, if you have a solar array that's on the ground, you could look at doing this too. So we just want to go, yay, win, 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 win all around. This is fantastic. You know, there's a few other ones that are, we're coming to get to know. Here it is, April. We are just passing the, last frost date, or typical last frost date here in Missouri. And, everybody, I know in my neighborhood, everybody's been out mowing and cleaning and, getting their garden already and so forth. And as much as I want to, I'm resisting. I'm resisting because I want to make sure that bees and native pollinators have access to really good quality food sources. April and May is some of the most important times for them to breed. Mommy and daddy bees really need high quality pollen for their babies. This is a really, again, it's like the putting milkweeds in your yard for the monarch butterflies. This is a fantastic way to get this started. It started in the UK, and then folks in Appleton, Wisconsin and Stevens Point that are mentioned here, they actually got people to sign up, register their yards for No Mow May, and then they did research to see what pollinator diversity and density was happening in yards that were not mowed compared to public spaces that had sort of a similar combination of lawn and native plantings that were vigorously, regularly mowed. And they found that the bee diversity was off the charts. How about that? Isn't that really cool? There's also a whole approach, again, from looking at research about maybe mowing, instead of mowing every week, so after May, instead of mowing every week, mow every other week. This really allows a lot of the, oh, great, thank you. A lot of the pollinating plants and these food sources to thrive, and you still get a nice lawn. And just think of the energy you can save. You could be drinking lemonade instead of mowing. And then lastly, a bee lawn. This is something that the University of Minnesota Extension is promoting. So I think we've had some chatting already about this. So what do you plant in your lawn? If you want green space for the kids to play soccer, for, the Frisbee, whatever, what could you plant and what could you do? A lot of the garden centers that really focus on native plants and can give you some really great suggestions are recommending Dutch white clover, creeping thyme, and then you have something for dinner too, because I tell you, a good quality thyme on some chicken, pretty good. Landscape, self-heal, even dandelions will support pollinators. And, and they tolerate some traffic, and they're green, 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 green. So yay, we're making sure that we're getting good information and we're passing this along to you, because these are things that we know work.
And these are things that we're going to have conversations with our neighbors about, because there are plenty of people that are going to be very upset if you have dandelions in your lawn. However, if you can invite them over for that glass of lemonade or that glass of Merlot or whatever, and have a conversation about the insects that are pollinating your yard and how beneficial that is, you might be able to bridge that gap. So where do you get the plants? if you are already engaged with ecological landscaping with native plants, you probably know some of this, but you're always on the lookout for where next. If you haven't engaged with this, it is so easy to start. And I think out of many, many resources, one of the best places to start is with Grow Native. This was originally our Missouri State Native Plant Program. It was launched in 1999, 2000 by the Missouri Department of Conservation. They oversee our fish, forests, and wildlife. They are a tax-supported state agency. And MDC grew Grow Native up to be a robust program that included supporting people who were growing and producing the native plants, marketing native plants, the idea of plants, the kinds of values that we're talking about here. And then also looking at this not only as a movement, but as a business, as an enterprise, as a win-win human, natural, and capital resources, that triple bottom line. They publish a resource guide every year. You can get them in print, you can get them online. That's the easy place to find who to hire to do this kind of work, where to get the plants. You get planting plans like that little kidney-shaped island down there. That's the ideal thing to start. Having that island suddenly sprout up out of your ocean of monocultural, extremely demanding, high maintenance turf, and perhaps expand that island from there. Grownative.org. When you go to a locally owned garden center, you'll see either purple and green plant tags, or perhaps even the places where the native plants are available, those shelves that display stuff will be painted purple. Grow Native, which is now managed by the Missouri Prairie Foundation, it was handed off to a nonprofit in 2012, I believe. So Grow Native is, in my humble opinion, the best native plant program in the US. That's saying something, because every state, I believe at this point, has one. Another really good resource is a program from St. Louis Audubon. It's called Bring Conservation Home. And this is a program that has been going, I believe, since 2012. What happens is you pay a very, very modest fee that also gets you a membership to Audubon and a team of 2 or 3 trained habitat advisors. People who are generally master gardeners or master naturalists. They go through a training, will come out to your property, walk around your property, and then give you a written report of everything that you have that is native, which you may not already know, anything you might have that's invasive, and most importantly, give you written recommendations for ways to biodiversify your place in accord with the nature of your place. Is it wet? Is it dry? Is it sloping? Is it flat? Is it sunny? Is it shady? And what are the aesthetics of the neighborhood like? So how can you kind of get this rolling without upsetting too many attitudinal apple carts? Very, very, very successful. Right now, there's a backlog of applications, but it's worth getting in the queue. And then the plants are for sale at Plant Sales. Shaw Nature Reserve, our Grace Summit rural outpost of Missouri Botanical Garden, will have our big annual spring wildflower market the Friday evening and Saturday of Mother's Day weekend. Very happy to be doing that back in person again this year. You can order plants from Missouri Wildflower Nursery, which is our largest grower. They're based in Eldon, Missouri, and they will drop them off at places like Kirkwood Farmers Market. We just had a plant sale last Sunday up at Beyond Housing in Normandy at the heart of the 24-1 communities. And it was a big success and reached new audience, new people who are going to be dancing with plants and exploring this ecological adventure. Go to your locally owned garden centers. They're the ones that make a specialization, that have a person on staff that knows natives, that sometimes have plant plug giveaways or other kinds of promotions. And every dollar you spend in a locally owned enterprise, out of every dollar you spend, 45 cents or more stays in your local community, compared to 15 cents or less that you might spend at a chain store. So there is that local power of green as well. Louise, the science of biophilia, this is a big deal, kind of motivating all this nature stuff too, yeah?
Well, we're talking about, we have a question.
Before we talk about biophilia, Tim had a question about, can you provide info on the plant market again? So I think it was 2 slides ago.
Yes. Okay. So Shaw Nature Reserve, the Spring Wildflower Market, the actual date, if you are a Missouri Botanical Garden member, this is a really good reason to join the garden. You can come to the members preview on Friday evening, May 6th. Did I say March? I meant May. Friday evening, May 6th. That's the night when there's live music and there's some wine and there's local beer and everybody, and then you get the best selection of the plants. And then Saturday, May 7th, will be open to the general public. There are at least 10, sometimes more, growers of native plants that are vendors at this market. It's the biggest native plant sale that we have in our region. It's super fun to have conversations, and it's a really, really great place to get to explore native plants and get good advice from people. And this photo was taken back in 2001 when I got a grant from the Department of Conservation to buy native plants for the place that we were working at the Earthways Center. It was one of the first times I had shopped for native plants. This is the beginning of my romance with native plants. And that's not, I like the person on the other side too, Emily Andrews, Executive Director of U.S. Green Building Council. She too loves native plants, but she's not my romantic interest. And I have a husband who I love.
So love, while we're talking about love, I'll just do a little segue. So during the pandemic, particularly during the time we were all inside, the spare bedroom, which was my office, looked out over an oak tree in our front yard. And it was, I would get, oh my God, there's a warbler, there's a yellow chat, there's, the nesting chickadees. It just filled me with hope and joy. It was so exciting to feel like I was living in the trees. And some really brilliant people, E.O. Wilson is one of them, and Stephen Kellert, have really looked, again, this is research-based, looked at this biophilia. And I hope some of you have heard of it, but it's really an innate, genetically determined love for the natural world that everyone has. And look at all these different positive impacts. You can imagine, certainly the pandemic creates stress, reduces stress, faster recovery, more stable blood pressure, improved sleep quality, and cognitive performance. Pretty darn remarkable. So this is a new-ish approach to looking at the built environment as well as the adjacent natural environment, really thinking about, biophilia. How do we create workspaces, gathering places that enhance all these feelings, which are so important for our basic health? Really, really critical. Next slide, please. Some of you may be aware of a term, nature deficit disorder. Again, we're digging into some really fantastic research. Richard Louv wrote a fantastic book. Last Child in the Woods was his first book. And then, many others, Nature Principle, Nature RX, Vitamin N, and founded the Children and Nature Network. We know that for our health and for the health of future generations, it's really, really important to have positive experiences in nature. I'll put in the chat the link to the Children and Nature website, and particularly as kind of a research nerd, I'm really interested in the latest findings, the latest research, and how we can use it here at the zoo with our programs, like our nature-based preschool, the work we do with teens, adults, school groups, and everyone. How do we enhance these connections and build bridges to help people have really positive, fun, delightful, healing, and healthful experiences in nature? I just love these photos, Jean. I mean, I hope, one of the things that's actually sad is these photos, I know they're contemporary kids, but this is pretty much what I grew up doing. My parents were like, go outside, no TV, go outside. You can come back when the sun comes down and it's dinner time. We had creeks to play in, we had woods, there was lots of discovery, open-ended play, and particularly open-ended play that's supported by an adult, you know, and nurtured and coached it's just so important, even for kids, as much as I hate to say kids' test scores, you know, as they get into school and start into that sort of competitive environment. Many kids who have ADHD or show up on the autism spectrum find a lot of healing from extended, safe, lovely play in nature. And one great place that just opened, and we're just, I mean, as a community, we should be all incredibly so proud. Forest Park Forever just opened this amazing nature playscape that's right here in the park. I'm talking to you from the zoo, and I get to go by this every morning when I come into work. It is based on all these biophilic design principles, using natural materials. You know, you see the children climbing in the tree, how to do this safely, how to do this in a way that is really building confidence, building competence. You know, it's just fantastic, really, really great. So, and you know what, I'll tell you a secret. You don't have to have a kid with you to go and hang out and have a good time. Same with the zoo. You don't have to have a kid with you. I mean, if you do, that's great. You know, borrow a neighbor's child, you know, if you need to, but you don't have to have a good time. I think we've got.
No, you do not. And you don't have to have a kid, but if, you know, go with a friend, go by yourself to the many, many places around our community to see native plants, to get to meet them already doing their thing. This presentation is not about how to garden with native plants. This is a big about the why, and this part is a little tour de force about the where. Places, ta-da, available to everyone. City Garden, downtown St. Louis. Did you know it is 100% planted with native plants? It's a very, very formal landscape. Missouri Botanical Garden advised on this. This is a really good example if you are on a corporate campus or a college campus, or you're in a Tony neighborhood or whatever, and you want the native plants to be like, City Garden is a good example of how to do that. It's a limited palette, it's formal plantings, and it's fabulous, and everybody can walk in there and have a great time. There are native plantings in the city. At the intersection of Kings Highway and Southwest and Vanderveer is the wonderful Bright Side St. Louis Demonstration Garden, which is also a working landscape. It is a stormwater management landscape, and it's a delightful place to walk around or hang out. You can walk in there anytime. It's got good signage, and the sidewalks are sparkly. And then out on the Katy Trail, this is at Piers, the little Piers General Store. Dan and Connie Burkhardt, who own this and also own some property further west on the trail, have been revitalizing what was just basically grass along a trail with, in this case, this is a 6-acre prairie. I was there one day last summer, went out with some friends to hear musicians playing on the porch, and I wound up spending the entire time in the prairie, and it was absolutely enchanting. It was in July. I was walking on a little mowed path, and I did not get one chigger bite. The Whitmire Wildflower Garden at Shaw Nature Reserve, one of the best, if not the best, native plant gardens in the US, and a native plant garden that is absolutely committed to using the native species, not cultivars, or what are sometimes called nativars. So if you want to see native plants for shade or for containers or for a boggy area or whatever, you can see them, you can enjoy them year-round at the Whitmire Wildflower Garden, and you can really learn about them. And this is a great place to go to meet some of those plants and then look them up and bring them home. It also has been a tremendous learning experience for the people who have been working there, most notably my esteemed colleague, Scott Woodbury, who's been the chief horticulturist. Louise, you have to speak about this. This is your place's native plants.
Yeah, it's one of them. We're trying to sneak them in everywhere we can. We have a lot of native trees, but we have a very specific meadow that's right adjacent to the Bayer Insectarium that we call Missouri Meadow. And you know, you've got some slides here about a pollinator cafe. We celebrate Native Pollinator Week in the end of June. So put that on your calendar. Yeah, the spot is just so delightful. It's so fun. And I tell you, there are times when I'm like, I need a nature moment in my job. And so just doing a couple quick loops around there. When we were in the pandemic and staff was asked to work on capacity monitoring and masking and all those things, and I was standing outside, I was just not paying as much attention to the people as I probably should have. Hawk moths and monarchs and just all sorts of really cool wasps and bees and native birds as well, goldfinches and ruby-throated hummingbirds, which, by the way, ruby-throated hummingbirds are, if they're not in your yard, they're very close. This is just such an exciting time of year.
When you grow it, they will come. I'm going to just kind of be a little tour de force here, a quick zip through other places to see native plants. Yes, we have golf courses. Yes, we have tennis courts. Yes, we have fabulous cultural institutions in Forest Park. We also have an extraordinary diversity of very, very healthy and uplifting ecological landscapes in and around Forest Park. When Forest Park master plan was being developed, native plantings were an anchor of that. And this was really early in our St. Louis native plant movement, when there was not a lot of expertise to do this kind of work. So when you're in Forest Park, you can see wildlife and you can experience some of what those ecological relationships are like after you get off the tennis court. Right smack in the middle of Olive Street Road, in the middle of suburban St. Louis, we have the campus of one of the world's premier biotech institutions, plant science institutions, the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center. And when Donald Danforth expanded their physical facilities several years ago, they also transformed their grounds. And now the grounds around this world-class biotech research center are a prairie. I drove by there actually today. I had to take my car out to a dealer for some service. And right now it's cut down. It's in its end of winter, going out of dormancy state. But as the weeks and the days go by, you will see that landscape come alive. And the fact that it is where it is a transformer of attitudes and values and aesthetics. You can put a little native landscape in the tiniest place. This is the home of Catherine Werner, Sustainability Director for the City of St. Louis. On her street, you can see very, very conventional landscapes, turf and boxwoods and Catherine Werner loves prairies. So she put a little prairie in a very intentional little space with a border around it. That's one way to say, I'm doing this on purpose. This is not a mess. This is not an accident, but there was Catherine's little prairie, little perfect little jewel of a prairie. Homeowners associations are going to be an interesting nut to crack because there are so many regulations and so many established values. Let me say that. However, when we start to see HOAs transform the ways in which they have their regulations and they have their expectations, I think we will see a cascade of that kind of transformation, because the landscape with native plants is so much more lush, so much more beautiful. Landscaping costs will ultimately go down. Stormwater management will increase in efficiency, wildlife will boost up, and property values will go up. Around schools, we see native landscapes as often or more often as we see food gardens. And a lot of times the same two kinds of gardening will be on the same property. This is Muscuda High School in Muscuda, Illinois. So this school property is now a learning lab. And as students are out there measuring and evaluating and observing and writing and experiencing and having their cells refreshed by that break on the school grounds, the school is able to use more of its budget for learning and less of its budget for grass cutting, and still have somebody on their staff or on contract to do some of this work. In the corporate environment, there is increasingly a call for an expectation of a reward for companies transforming their landscapes with ecological principles and native plants. And the first to do that in a really big way here in St. Louis was Alberici Constructors. They did it because they were going for the highest level of LEED certification in the world, and they had to retain 100% of the stormwater on their property. And they were really a standard setter for how to use native plants in formal and workplace settings. Lovely walking paths around this property. Our Metropolitan Sewer District is giving grants to property owners to use native plants as the workhorses for stormwater management features. This is called green infrastructure, and it's another thing that is really giving a boost to our thriving native plant movement here. What you're doing is you're using the plants to do what plants have always done, which is capture and filter and direct water. And when I talk about this, I always like to say that Rainscaping, green infrastructure, does not put the concrete guys out of work. We still need that profession, and it leverages in not only the power of plants, but the green industry, the horticultural industry, the designers, the installers, the maintainers. It is a win-win-win, and it is rocking. And when you transform that pond, that holding pond in the middle of your condo development or your office park, from a hole in the ground with water and mosquitoes and Canada geese, which are great until they nip at you and they poop all over the grass, with native plants, suddenly you have habitats, suddenly you have liveliness, you have nature around people, and that is a really good thing for the nature and the people.
So we've given you some really great ideas. Where can you go and see native planting? What's accessible? Where is it? And here's like a sort of a power map that our colleagues at the Botanical Garden, and I'm just going to say anything we're doing in all of this biodiversity space is super collaborative. We have so many different organizations in St. Louis who are all pitching in and working together. It's like, how do we all work together to make all boats rise, particularly the ones that are carrying bees and native birds and native plants. So the map on the right-hand side is available. I think it's available now, right, Jean, on the...
It's about ready to be posted on the biodiversity pages of the garden's website. It's going through a couple of last tiny little tweaks shortly.
So one of the things that we're going to do is, in addition to this recording, we're going to create a list of resources, clickable resources that will include a lot of the things that we've been talking about. We recognize a lot of folks have been asking more detailed questions. And then, so this is where to go. And then what do you do? Another incredible collaborative that is really global is City Nature Challenge. So it's all about getting people outdoors. Could be your yard, could be your neighbor's yard, could be the local park, could be you go on some adventure and explore one of these wonderful natural spaces. Download the iNaturalist app and take pictures of your nature sightings. Here are the dates: April 29, 30, May 1st and 2nd. We have researchers, people who can tell the difference and go, yeah, that's a robin. No, it's not a rufous-sided towhee. Sorry. But robins are cool. Robins are good. We like robins. And we're working on building an urban biodiversity inventory for the region, for the entire region. This is really, really important because many of us recognize that we've lost a lot of biodiversity over the past several hundred years. And it's important to know what's there, when, and working together on what is it that we can do about it? What can we do?
We've been working together on this for a long time, Louise. And boy, as you said, it is a network of peeps, of colleagues, of cooperation and collaboration that would make Mother Nature proud.
So I love the way you call this the founding mothers. There have been additional mothers before us, I'll just say. So it's a long line of, and we've had some, anyway, not to get too gender nerdy here, but we've had a wide variety of people. So looking at the list down below, so many different organizations, people stepping up. How can they help? What can they do? What information do they have? What information do they need? How can they work on different codes, building codes or HOA codes to be able to plant milkweed for their monarchs? How do they work on a community-wide basis? So, you know, there's really, it's about the diversity of life, active, healthy, nature-rich living, and increasing the capacities of community to practice sustainable stewardship. I tell you, there is nothing more fulfilling than throwing yourself into something and realizing you're making a difference. And that's really what we're talking about. This is how to make a difference. So, oh, great, Angie, thank you. We'll touch on that in a minute. So, Biodiverse City has kind of spawned this, this other project that is really sort of working with the East-West Gateway Council of Governments, working to create a sustainability plan for our region. What are the areas we need to work on? What are the areas we need to focus on? Who do we need to talk to? You know, and one of the areas is biodiversity. And that's what, you know, Jean and I are heading this up. So if you think about our region, you know, from the typical AAA highway map, you know, this is what it looks like. It doesn't look very biophilic, does it? But this is what this really is. If you think about all the different landscapes, the different watersheds, we have a really incredibly rich region. We have, you know, all sorts of woodlands and bluffs and different kinds of tree biodiversity that's amazing. You know, just some of the areas are just fantastic to stop and look and listen and go, wow, St. Louis isn't this, the region isn't this homogeneous everything. It's really diverse and needs our help. So we're doing a lot with species inventory. Thank you for helping with City Nature Challenge, because that information on iNaturalist really helps feed this. We're looking at working with a lot of partners on both sides of the river. You know, how do we create enhanced biodiversity corridors and projects and plans? I'll just speak for the zoo a little bit. Some of you may know that we have purchased some acreage that's right up in Spanish Lake. It's very, very close to the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi. And it was a golf course, but there was a lot of native animals that use this space. And we've done a lot of research, even during COVID, to figure out what native animals are using that space. And then as we design, you know, all the things that we're going to design for that, how do we include the need for these animals to make their way through at different times of the year, you know, to enhance their habitat needs and so forth. So that would be like a great story of an opportunity. We want to really push out research findings, you know, nature-friendly policies and practice. Again, we want to elevate and we want to say, way to go, congratulations. You know, Wildwood, for instance, has some really amazing nature-friendly policies and practices. And then also really help with doing an inventory of groups that are actively stewarding local landscapes. And oh my gosh, in St. Louis, there are so many groups. That kind of passion in ownership and, you know, dogged persistence is a very critical ingredient for success.
So as a climate solution, looking at where we are on the planet and what kind of place is around us, ecology, relationships in place. Yes, I work for the Missouri Botanical Garden and I consider myself now a plant ally. I am not one, but I am advancing their cause, speaking for them. The power of ecological landscaping to restore habitat, to support pollinators, to sequester carbon, and we're looking at ways to get better data on that, more ways to track data on that, to manage stormwater. Did I say that already? And to connect ourselves and bring our feelings alive and give ourselves the refreshment that nature can give us. Even in extreme circumstances in life, nature can give you that. It's a plant-based you can do, and we are not starting from scratch. I mentioned Doug Tallamy earlier, who's a major national spokesperson for the importance and the value of ecological landscaping. He has said over and over and over again in public, St. Louis is the leader among cities in the country in our native plant movement. I have had the opportunity during the pandemic to give Zoom talks to the entire Texas Master Naturalists organization and people in Ohio and people in Indiana, and going recently to Lawrence, Kansas to work with some master gardeners. We're sharing information back and forth, and what St. Louis is doing and the resources that we have, the partnerships that we have, the processes that we are using are replicable and adaptable to many different kinds of places. This may seem like it's not really very much. What we're doing in our gardens, what we're doing in our human relationships as we dance with plants, but it is very powerful and it's joyful and it works. So we are very happy to take questions. We have a little bit of time yet. We also have the zoo and the garden both have question lines. If you have animal questions, you can ask the St. Louis Zoo, animalquestions@stlzoo.org. If you have questions at any time about anything having to do with sustainable living, you can ask Missouri Botanical Garden. Our Green Resources Info Service is at your service. greenresources@mobot.org. And then Biodiverse City, St. Louis, which is it's a network of organizations that are doing many different kinds of things to advance and protect and understand and connect to biodiversity in our area. We have a wonderful bi-monthly e-news that comes out. No zealots will call on you, but you'll get good information coming to you in an easily digestible way. So let me leave this up for a minute so that you can get these resources. And how can we take questions now, Louise?
Yeah, I'm just going to add a little note here. I just want to say, Jean, and for the Missouri Botanical Garden, you guys have been really leading the way in this collaboration and being able to get funding to support your time and funding to support the resources. And it's just been really great to be along for the ride and help as much as we can. Again, this is St. Louis. We work together on good solutions.
Yep, it's a phenomenal network of peeps and friends and colleagues with common interests. And every once in a while you want to give somebody a poke in the snoot, but that's human beings. That's okay. You get over it, you get past it. You want to do that with a plant every once in a while too, or you just dig it up and move it. Lisa, are there questions you've been moderating in the Q&A?
And we don't have anything in the Q&A, but we've had some good stuff in the chat earlier on, and I hope I answered this correctly. But Katie asked, she lives in the city on Tam by Francis Park, and was wondering if she's been considering switching her lawn to clover or phlox. So I figured clover is a great idea. I wasn't sure about phlox, so thought we'd kick that to you guys and see what you thought.
There are small varieties of phlox. I am not a plants woman, Katie. I'm a talker. I personally have not grown small phlox, but I would say try changing parts of it. I think especially if it's in your front yard, and especially if you think you're going to get pushback from your neighbors, start with a little island of something, and that also will be less work for you. And then eventually perhaps you can have a whole archipelago of native planted stuff. In terms of ground cover, in terms of turf replacement, there is some really good guidance. We had a little bit of that earlier in the presentation. One kind of plant is not what I would advise in general for a habitat creation, a diversity of plants. And there may be stuff already growing there that you could just kind of let go and not be so much monitoring or manicuring as much as you might be. Not passing a judgment on you though, Katie.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Just kind of, instead of trying to transform everything all at once, trying a smaller spot, see how it works. I think that's a great idea.
I'm going to add a little bit about phlox that I learned from our friends at the Missouri Wildlife Nursery, because that was one of the things I spent a lot of money on in the pandemic. Because, you know, it made me feel good, and it was beautiful, and you know, for all the right things. But I learned that rabbits really like phlox. So if you have rabbits, it's going to be difficult to grow phlox. They'll love the clover. The clover won't mind. The clover will just keep doing what clover does. And clover's a legume, so it's also pushing nitrogen into the soil, which is good for everybody else.
Yes, they also like phlox for their nests as well as for food.
It sounds like the voice of experience, Lisa.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, and so we actually had a couple pop up in the Q&A. Meredith is brand new to St. Louis and is trying to learn what's available. Looking to build a rain garden and other measures to mitigate water and turn their immense lawn into a more biodiverse area. Suggestions where to start. Previously built drought tolerant landscape. So all I can think of is grow native, but what other good places are out there for?
A really good place to start, Meredith, is the Rainscaping section of Missouri Botanical Gardens website, which is mobot, mobot.org, mobot.org/rainscaping. When you go there, you will see a graphic. It was in one of our slides, and it's like an image of a residential property, and it's got all these little bubbles out beyond it. And they are the whole range of strategies that you can use, plant-based strategies and some hardscaping strategies like pervious pavement to capture and hold stormwater where it falls, which is rainscaping. So I suggest that you look at that. There are contractors who are well-versed in rainscaping. MSD, Metropolitan Sewer District Project Clear, has a grants program. It's very competitive, but it's worth looking into that to potentially recoup some of the costs. I want to say there's no one size fits all for landscaping and for plants, for native plants. Remember, they're wild flowers. They have names like Joe Pye weed and milkweed and wild bergamot and stuff like that. So you want to kind of experiment with them and mess around with them and see what works. It's good to start on a smaller scale. And relative to rainscaping, we have terrific resources here, mobot.org/rainscaping. You can get biodiversity and stormwater management.
Awesome. And we had another question. Oh, sorry, Louise.
I was just going to say, all the climate models show St. Louis, this region, is wetter and warmer, which is already happening. So go, go, go. That's exactly what you're doing. You're figuring out ways to really adapt and, you know, possibly ameliorate some of those issues.
Awesome.
I saw Gracie's question about better native plants to start with. You know, that's like saying, is it better to eat a cookie or better to eat a brownie? Really? I think the question is, where would you like to have native plants? Would you like to create a pollinator garden in a sunny place where a lot of things can flower? Is your place really shady? Would you like to get some native plants established in and around what you might already have? Think about where you'd like to have the native plants and then start looking for plants that will do well in those circumstances. The Missouri Wildflower Nursery's annual catalog is organized exactly that way. Is it sunny? Is it shady? Is it wet? Is it dry? It's in full color. It's a really great thing to have around to start looking and thinking about those plants. And then when you go to a place like the Whitmire Wildflower Garden or the Missouri Meadow at the zoo, you'll see some signage about what those plants are. And if there's one that you like that appeals to you, try that one.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Jean, you mentioned that the Missouri Wildflower Nursery folks are at the Kirkwood Farmers Market, at least through the end of April, I think, maybe, you know, one or two last weekends. And full reveal, I live in Kirkwood, and I've just walked down and gone, you know, in between customers. So what do I do about this? And what about, can you tell me about that? I will say, I asked about golden currants, Jean, and they were like, oh, we've been sold out of those for months. Everybody wants them. It's a beautiful bush that has the most lovely smell. I know it from actually from Jean's backyard. But it's, it's good to know where that's one source, but that's also an opportunity just to go and chat with somebody and get some really good expertise.
I'm typing into the chat.
Oh, thank you.
www.mowildflowers.net. That is the website of Missouri Wildflower Nursery. As I said, they're the largest grower, one of many growers, but the largest of native plants in Missouri. And you can call and they will send you a catalog, or they will be at the Kirkwood Farmers Market. There was 4 dates in April, 2 dates in May. They'll be at the Shaw Nature Reserve Wildflower Market. I never have one very far if I want to look up who and what and where and just look it up on paper.
Fabulous. And I think we have time for one more question. So Lynn has a really good question about a fenced-in backyard with pets. So would like plants that are dog trample and dog pee tolerant. I have a feeling after everything I've just learned that maybe a combo situation of a smaller lawn with a lot of other native options, but want to kick it to you both as well.
Yeah, and one of your turf needs can change as your life goes on. I was talking to a friend the other day whose son is getting ready to go into high school and is still playing soccer with his friends on the lawn, but that's going to change at some point. Something that you can do if you have dogs and you like to have your dogs run in your yard, start at the very edges of your yard and bring those edges in, and maybe have kind of a snaky border, and have between your boundary and that little border be a little bit of a birdland. Start with bushes, things that dogs are less likely to trample. And depending on whether you have shady or sunny conditions, think about it. What you're doing is you're creating habitat, you're creating spaces that you can enjoy, that your whole household can enjoy, and that will be spaces that will welcome pollinators and other wildlife into the place that you inhabit. So it's kind of like getting to develop whole new rooms of space and dwelling and enjoyment, and then furnish them with plants.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just add, having a fenced backyard and a rambunctious dog. Part of what we've done is just watch what the dog does and her favorite places to do X and Y and Z, and just give it up. Just give it up and try to encourage her to do her thing, which involves getting up high and barking at the dog that's immediately in the backyard. So that's her thing. So I'm not gonna, whatever. That's all good. But I know where she really hardly ever goes, and luckily she's not a digger. So.
Yeah. Well, and before we sign off, I have to give an extra shout out to Mascoutah. Half my family's from there, Jean, and my mom grew up there. And for me, it's an even bigger deal because an entire town is surrounded by farmland. So to have them convert such a big space back to prairie just made me very happy tonight. So that was really great to hear.
Yeah. Can I give a last word on behalf of the plants in the Botanical Garden?
Please.
This stuff is impactful. This is not fluffy. It's joyful. You can mess around. You can make mistakes. You can dig up things. Gardening is all about tinkering and trying things. And then if it doesn't work, dig it up and give it to somebody else, or dig it up and move it. This is our species, Homo sapiens, working with the plant world, the plant kingdom, to reconnect the relationships that our habitat has trampled on, or has ripped up, or because we didn't know. Ecology and I are the same age. We haven't known this stuff that long, but learning it and then digging into it and then forming and valuing and enjoying these relationships, this is real. These are climate solutions that are also uplifting and joyful and healing, and that go under your solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
Yay.
Absolutely. Louise, was there anything else you'd like to say?
Golly, I think I have no more words.
I know.
Except, this has just been a delight to be with you all and to share all of this information. Hope it really, warms the cockles of my heart that so many people have joined us today and have such great questions and are really doing what Jean suggested. We'll try this. Let's figure it out. Let's see what can happen. There are a lot of folks you can ask questions of, and we'll be sharing a lot of resources with you when we share the recording.
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Jean.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, St. Louis Zoo. The zoo is the leading institution in our community in elevating having the dialogue about climate change and climate solutions. Thank you, thank you, thank you, St. Louis Zoo, for taking that lead and having so many entities be partners and setting that example and creating the opportunity to have these exchanges.
Well, thank you, Jean, and thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And again, I can't thank Louise and Jean enough from the bottom of my heart for their fabulous presentation and facilitating this discussion this evening. So everyone, please be on the lookout for information on next month's Community Climate Forum, which will be held on May 12th at 5:30 p.m. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.